Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. I am your host, John Ryan, and I'm very psyched today. We're going to have a lot of shows today. I'm going to be on a couple shows. And speaking of which, at 1 o'clock, I will be on with Kiev, who is my guest today, and Kyle Hunter, and that's always a blast. You know, I honestly tell you that there's those two together. I always come away with a lot of good information, and I'm smarter for it. You know, so welcome to the show, Kiev. I appreciate you being on again. And I mean, is there a more exciting time than right now? We're basically 24 hours away, and I like getting goosebumps yet, waiting to get on these games.
Well, I mean, baseball starting. You got some prep races for horse racing this weekend. You got the Final Four on Saturday. Holy cow, the slate is full, my man. Of course, let's not forget about NBA and hockey. There's just everything's out there. It's so much fun. You know, it is a little bittersweet that the NCAA is ending right now. It's like it's been a weird year, but I love college basketball. It's just been so fun to watch. But you know, you're also kind of ready to get into baseball. And I'll tell you, I watched that Seattle Oakland game. The Seattle went over to extra innings last night, and they came back 6-1. And San Francisco's pitchers completely blew it, and it was like they kept walking in runs, and that's just kind of the rust from the bullpen. But there was I could actually hear the few people in their crowd last night, which was really exciting. I was having some beers, my buddy stopped by, and we're watching baseball, and I watched it kind of from morning all the way to the very last game, which was that. So that was a lot of fun as well.
You know, and that's one of the things. Before we get to the breakdown of the games, you know, I've been thinking about. What are the takeaways from this tournament? And I think the really cool thing, or the really positive thing, was being able to hear the fans in Indianapolis. You know, whether it was at the Lucas Oil Stadium or Hinkle Fieldhouse, there was enough there that they weren't big in numbers, but they made a lot of noise, and it almost made it feel like it was almost normal, I guess. And that's one of the biggest things I'll always remember is when you started hearing the fans in the stands.
Yeah, and that made me a little bit more excited too, because I think some stadiums, I thought Texas said that they're allowing all their fans, and then then I think people will start adjusting. Probably California might be last, New York too, but I don't know the order. But it's nice to see that coming. You know, it's funny. I mean, the Cubs played yesterday, and they stunk, but you know, whatever. I got my World Series in 2016, so whatever. But it was so cold there. It was like 36, 35 degrees, and with the wind chill, it was probably more like 30. So it's like, if you're a fan, it's not the worst thing to wait till May to go to a game.
True. That is very true. I was watching that the Rangers were playing Kansas City, and I had a play on the Rangers mainly because they were 0-6 on opening day if it was on the road, and it was one of those p-value things that reverses. So it was supportive of all the stuff that was supporting Texas in the first place. But you know, that game just got completely out of hand. You know, very early. I think it was. Yeah, what was it? 15 runs in the first. Yeah. It was crazy.
You were done with the game by the second or third inning there. Yeah, that was and then all of a sudden Kansas City comes back. They were down by a massive amount. It's like two really bad teams just hitting up each other.
Yeah, it was 14-10 final. I actually saw at least what I have experienced as the highest in-game run total I've ever seen, which was 22.5. And that, obviously, if you bet the over, that would have won.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just crazy. You get those kind of games at Arlington, but it's rare that you would get it at Kansas City like that. But you know, we're in a different time, and I thought Houston's Zach Greinke, the ageless veteran, I guess we call him, winning 8-1 against Oakland, and what can you say about Greinke? I suppose this is probably his last year. But it defines pitching. Greinke's a guy that never really threw hard, but he has movement. And I actually was looking on the FX stats. His changeup now moves in on right-handers 7 inches.
Well,
that's a lot.
that frustrates me a little bit because Greinke's normally a bad starter in April, and then all of a sudden he does this. It's like all the times I've had him on my fantasy baseball team, and he's screwing up for me, and now he's And I seriously looked at that game to bet on it, and I was like, oh, I can't trust Greinke in April, and all of a sudden he looks awesome. So maybe he's a play-on pitcher next game. But we have some basketball to talk about, don't we?
We do. Yeah, we do.
Let's do it.
But only if you want to. I mean, we can talk about anything you want. I don't know. I know you're. I'm just kidding. For those that don't know, I mean, we're probably two of the biggest college basketball fans there are, especially when it involves the Big Ten. And even though there's not a Big Ten school in the semifinals and the Final Four, it's still just as passionate as if Iowa, Illinois, and Michigan were all in it. So at this point, it does not matter.
Yeah, the Big Ten just couldn't place consistent enough. I mean, Illinois had that choker against Loyola, and it was partially how Loyola's a good team, and then Loyola had their stinker. It's just everybody has stinkers in the NCAA tournament except for Gonzaga. And Baylor had theirs for 3/4 of that game versus Nova, but thank goodness they came back. But you saw how Arkansas struggled so many times. You saw, barely getting by Texas Tech and Oral Roberts. You look at Houston that almost lost to Rutgers. Actually, they were penciled in to lose that game in the last 2 minutes, and Rutgers came back or Rutgers just choked. And
yeah, they did.
And Houston won that game. I think that was good for Houston, actually. But the only team that's intimidating the rest is Gonzaga, and their spread is massive here, buddy.
It is. It came in pretty much where my numbers said at 14. It opened at 13.5 at most of the places in Vegas. 14.5 right now at Pinnacle, but it's 14 across the board. But it's interesting that it's minus 105 vig at Westgate, and it's minus 115 at Bookmaker. So it seems like the brick and mortar places, I would call it, are getting more even flow action, I think, and it might be a reflection that Vegas is pretty close to Los Angeles, and there was a big, California contingent in Vegas, from what I hear, and they were obviously betting USC and UCLA, so maybe they stayed.
Well, maybe they come back this weekend, and maybe you get a better line, but the offshore should be a little bit different. Market than just the Vegas books, but some of the offshore trust the Vegas books. Most of them don't. Pinnacle doesn't. Bet Online doesn't, but there's other people that use those books that might go the direction of the money in Vegas. My thing is, is Gonzaga going to have a stinker? Because how do you predict that? I don't think so. Actually, my number's 14 on the dot, John. So yours is too. So we're both exactly the same number. What am I supposed to do here? I have the score 81-67, so I do have a lean to the over. But if UCLA pulls a Michigan and craps the bed, or pulls a USC against Gonzaga, that's the problem. People talking about UCLA's defense. Let's face it. Yes, their defense has stepped it up, but also the other teams are not even hitting free throws. Alabama was 44%. Michigan couldn't hit a free throw. Michigan wasn't hitting shots. It was a combination of the refs not calling fouls, swallowing their whistles, which we like in general as just fans, and it was a combination of a little bit of their defense. And it was a heck of a lot of these teams just not playing up to caliber. So that's why you get this 14-point spread here. But the funny thing, the metric sites say 12. It's probably a little juiced. I had to give a little extra to Gonzaga in my numbers just because of the fact that they are statistically final a lot in their games. There's that extra gear. But, dude, 14 points is such a monster. I could see them just having a few hiccups, and maybe UCLA guys like Tyga Campbell – have a great game, and all of a sudden he keeps hitting threes. That kind of thing could happen, and then you're like, holy cow, Gonzaga's really flustered, like when they played against BYU. It's too big of a spread, man. I like to play it, and I talked that I might play Gonzaga, but I think in game for sure here. But one thing you might want to trust in this game is the team total. They've only went under 80 points twice, and they probably could have got more of those games. I mean, those games that they went under 80, they did really well. And I'm sure Mick Cronin's going to try to slow it down. But if they're down by 10 points quick, they can't play slow. They're just going to play themselves completely out of the game. So that's why I kind of like the over. But what does worry me about the over is UCLA completely not showing up in the second half. So hedgeable if you take the over.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Gonzaga is one of those teams, and there's a lot of them in NCAA basketball where under my machine learning stuff I do, if the predictive values are saying that there's, and I haven't run the Gonzaga game yet, but let's say reasonably that there's an 80% probability that Gonzaga will score 81 or more. And that's what the line implies, as you said. Gonzaga does really, really well against the spread, exceeding 81. And teams that average in the 80s, that are high-powered offenses, like in Iowa, they do extraordinarily well when they score 81 or more, and progressively better the closer you get to 90. And, in some rare cases, you get, closer to 100. So I don't, I have absolutely zero regression on Gonzaga, and that was something I mentioned like 2 weeks ago. They just seem to be getting better and better and better and better. And when was the last time you saw a college basketball team with the precision passing? That's what my takeaway was from the last game.
And I've seen that in Mark Few teams before, but they're just better this year. I mean, they're just really in tune with each other, and there's 5 guys that can score. There's multiple guys that can bail each other out, right? When you've seen Michigan play UCLA, Franz Wagner had the worst game of his career, 1 for 14, something like that. He lost the game for his team, but they didn't have that leadership like an Isaiah Livers there to bail Michigan out. And Juwan Howard, I mean, he's got some talent, and he's done, I guess, some pretty good things as a coach, but he really did not adjust and try to take it to this team. He should have played tougher in the paint, and he should have had some better Hunter Dickinson involvement there. I know he took like 10 shots, which is a decent amount, but this should have been just the Hunter Dickinson game, in my opinion. When the rest of the team's not hitting, they don't have that, but Gonzaga's got that. They got plenty of guys that can bail them out. Suggs, they just have Tim.
It's endless.
Timmy's doing amazing, right? And Corey Kispert, 6'7", hits threes out of his mind. Come on. What can you do?
The one thing I do know recently, UCLA, when I really dug into them after they won the second game in shocking fashion, which was actually technically their third to get to the Sweet 16 because they won in overtime against Michigan State, and then they had another overtime game, and you would think fatigue would be an issue. But it won't be in this game because of the number of days of rest, obviously, between the last game and this one. Mm-hmm. But they do have 7 players on that roster that are top 100 high school recruits. And that kind of made me go, oh, so now we're starting to see the pedigree that's on this roster that doesn't get mentioned. Mm-hmm. But still, at the end of the day, I think we're witnessing one of the best offensive teams in terms of efficiencies of at least the last 20 years. You go back to Houston when they had those 2 chances to win back in the 80s and failed. Even that team didn't measure up to what Gonzaga has done this year. And keep in mind, too, the game has evolved. If you look at the NBA, it's very glaring there because you have, the pictures of the Larry Bird era with not just the short shorts, but the physiques. They're faster, they're stronger, they jump higher, they dribble much, much better. And the same thing with college. So arguably it could be one of the greatest teams ever if they win it. But Kiev, I'll tell you what I did. And this will set up the next game. I have Houston winning it. I have a little, and I've been saying it now. I guess this is the 3rd show I've said it. And I'm, my therapist is only a phone call away, and I figure I can say this without fear. But I ran my I have a lot of Python apps, so I ran a probability study that I've used in the past, and I actually ran it twice because it came up with Houston as a 30% probability to win the whole thing. Gonzaga was 26. UCLA was less than 2%. and Baylor was 20.
So you have Houston win the whole thing.
Only because I'm getting such incredible value at 6-1 right now. And for me, it's like I won't play the money line necessarily in the Houston Baylor game. I still may take the points and maybe sprinkle a little bit on the money line, but I'm getting 6-1, and that's kind of my bet that Houston beats Baylor and at least gets to the final. So maybe if that would happen, I would. Maybe I get a little cautious and hedge it. I don't know.
You can't hedge it. 6-1 is not good odds, though.
No, because I'd have to take Gonzaga at -7.
Well, you're getting what plus? Was it 200 plus 250? What is it? Let me get it right now. Plus 185 on Houston, and then you're going to get plus 600 just in the Gonzaga game itself. That's a money line rollover is like 15-1 plus 1500 there minimum. I mean, because you're rolling over your winning and your bet. I mean, if that's what you think that Houston could win it all, 6-1 is horrible odds. I would do the money line rollover in a second.
Well, I agree with that, but I usually calculate without rolling over the profit too. So if I do like $100 rollover, I only do the 100. So if I win, $350, including the 100, a net profit of $250 on a bet, I'll still revert back to the 100, because then if the next round they lose, I still have something to gain. But your way is probably the better way in terms of it's definitely better in terms of ROI. If a team like this would win,
instead of barely squeaking by Baylor, and if you're lucky there, you're at 6-1, which is a losing bet if they don't, and then hedging against Gonzaga, laying -600, probably -700, something like that, you're already losing. So 6-1's not good odds in this situation, but I think what you could do is take them on the money line here. But so let's get into the game, though. So you think that they're going to beat Baylor?
I do. I actually do. I think a lot of the sentiment with Houston is negative. I have that Twitter app that I run that goes through 1,100 tweets and assesses the betting community's opinions or sentiment, and it's a contrary indicator, as you know. So that came up big time in favor of Houston in this matchup. It's Baylor, Baylor, Baylor. In fact, 67% of the tickets, 78% of the money right now is on Baylor. Yet the line opened at 4.5, and we're only at 5. When I see numbers like that, I would think we should be at 5.5 and maybe even 6, given the volume that will be bet on this game.
For Baylor?
Yeah. I mean, just in total for both games. These will be the two biggest in terms of money take and also number of tickets written the whole tournament, and it's always the case. But I know it's very contrarian to take Houston right now. Everybody wants to see Baylor and Gonzaga. I get it. I'm not trying to spoil the milk here at all. But I think I have a pretty decent bet here with Houston at +5, and then as you mentioned, the money line is okay. It's not real exceptional, but if Houston does win, I actually have them as only a 7-point dog to Gonzaga.
Okay.
That is what I would expect the line to come out at, maybe 7.5. So I feel like I'm on the ledge here, and I need you to talk me off of it.
Well, what side? What side do you think I'm on?
Well, I would think you would be on Gonzaga to win the whole thing.
For sure. We're talking about this game now.
Well, I'm going to say Houston.
You're right. I'm on Houston, so I'm not talking you off the ledge here, but I'm also one of the few, so be careful. There's a lot of people like the Baylor. Here's the thing about this Houston team. They're not a great shooting team, and yes, they played in a terrible conference. But why should that matter when they did well in the non-conference? And it was a small non-conference, but they were only a dog once against Texas Tech this whole year. And what did they do as a 3-point dog? They won by 12 points, right? Yep. About a 15-point ATS mark. See, we haven't seen Houston play as a dog. That's a mentality that teams have. They're going to come into this game as like, oh, we're not going to win this? I want to see them do that. I want to see what Quentin Grimes does. I think Quentin Grimes is good enough to keep them in this game. I think there's narrative problems with the fact that they only play double-digit seeds. So what? Did you see that defense against Syracuse? I mean, it was fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, the big issue is if they start out really slow and Baylor pulls a Gonzaga, maybe they can't come back. I don't know. But Baylor only stops the field goal at a rank 120th. Okay, they're not that good against the shot, against a normal field goal. And their defense is good because they steal the ball, but Houston's actually pretty good at ball control. And that's the thing. You know, Houston, it's not like Houston's a UCLA that's kind of snuck into the top 10. They're not like an Oregon State that's or top 20. I'm sorry, they're 15th at KenPom. They're not like an Oregon State that kind of snuck in. They've been there the whole time because of their efficiencies, you know. And these efficiency sites at least will look at some of the teams that Houston beat, like a Texas Tech, like a Boise State, like a South Carolina, and it adjusts because South Carolina is this good because they played in the SEC. So it really kind of takes everything. The efficiency site says is pick them. Pick them. I mean, it's like when usually people veer towards KenPom, but the market's saying F you, probably because this has been such a random tournament right now. But my number's in the middle. I have Baylor -3. So for me, the points make sense. And I would not be shocked if you have a hedging opportunity at a halftime. What if Houston's up by 5 at halftime? Second half spread's going to be -4. You're golden. You have plenty of options at that situation. Now that might not happen, but at one point you have to go back to these efficiency sites. They're good. I mean, they're not bad. They're not right all the time because games are so random, but I mean, the number's too big in my opinion. So I agree with you, John. Not talking you out.
Yeah, I think I actually was listening to your show with our mutual friend Adam Burke over there at ats.io, and it was either Haslam or Torvik, I think, had Houston favored, if I remember the show right.
Bar Torvik did.
Okay. And that's probably a good example of the one of the many. Well, not many. There's a few very good efficiency sites, and the two I just mentioned I would put up there pretty high.
Well, Haslam has Baylor winning 70.6 to 69.9, 0.7 points. So there you go.
And Torvik actually has Houston favored by like a point, right?
Yeah, Torvik's got 1.1 for Houston, and in KenPom's -1 for Baylor. So, I mean, like I said, I will punish Houston some for being in the American Athletic Conference, but I'm not going to punish them 5 points for it when they're a really good team and they're coming in as a dog. That's what you have to remember. Don't be shocked to see them pissed off in the beginning of this game.
I agree 100%.
So,
Scott Drew's going to have his hands full. Well, Kelvin Sampson, I think, is he's getting attention now, but during the regular season, I don't think he got the attention of being the coach that he is.
I'll take Sampson over Drew.
I would too.
Drew's living off the talent in his team right now, but they can get kind of sloppy too. I'll take Sampson over him. So coaching as well. And I'm curious to see what Kyle says on our next show too. So we might have to high five and tag team against Kyle because, we'll see what direction he goes. Maybe he'll give us a good total.
Yeah, I think so. But when you get back to the Gonzaga game, I just cannot make a case for UCLA pulling off the dramatic upset. But it has occurred in the Final Four historically. Here's a fun fact for you. I gave this as a tweet as a little trivia on Monday, and I did not know this. This is the first time and only the second time in the last 30 years of the Final Fours that two teams from the same state have played each other. All right, so that's a fun little fact, right? The last time was 2012 with Louisville and Kentucky, and obviously now. The thing that blew my mind was that no team from the state of Texas has won this thing. You have to go all the way back to the 60s with Western Texas, and there was a movie that escapes me right now. That very famous sports movie.
I thought the Longhorns might have got it. Or did they lose with Durant in that final game with Kevin Durant? I
Yep.
think that's what it was. Yeah.
Houston had 2 shots and failed in both. But that kind of blew my mind. You had to go all the way back to that era. And back even a little bit further than that, I think Western Texas won it with only 8 teams in the tournament.
Well, yeah, because there were 16 teams for a while. 32 for a short while. Going way back. You could look in the NBA going way back, and people are saying, "Well, that's not exactly the game that's played today, is it?" So I guess maybe motivation for Baylor, but it doesn't matter where you're from. I have.
Oh, it doesn't.
I just have Houston and Baylor pretty close, and that's my thing. Shout out to Glenn Middleton, by the way, in the comments there, one of our great followers, members, and listeners. Say what's up, Glenn. I also want to say that this spread in the Gonzaga game, going back to that, no other spread's been this big in a Final Four. So this would be the biggest upset in college basketball history, not by the points, but by the whole situation itself, if UCLA does it. So there should be a lot of nervous people. If for some chance this game is close, with 10 minutes left in this game, I would expect the ratings to go through the roof, of this game. I'm excited for the Final Four and everything that we got going on this weekend.
Oh, I am too. I just cannot wait. And I think the order of the games makes sense too. That was scheduled a long time ago, but the fact that it's Houston Baylor first, it gets you lathered up a little bit, and then maybe the dog does do something rather dramatic.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
But I think honestly, if you get Gonzaga in game at anything under, anything approaching 7, I would think that would probably be a good entry point. That would imply that Baylor's probably got a 2 or 3 point lead, or not Baylor, UCLA. And Gonzaga, you'll find, especially in the first half, they'll still be favored by a ton. So the market won't come down very much if Baylor or UCLA gets off to a great start. At least that's what I'm anticipating.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to see you in a little bit here. So this is great, and then we can rehash it. Maybe we put Kyle up against the wall and make him make a pick in this Houston Baylor game, because I have a gut feeling he's on the Bears, but I don't know that for a fact. You're going to have to tune in to find out. All right. So for Kiev O'Neil, myself, and the Predictive Playbook, always remember that all the wins be yours.